The area of occupations that this project classified for me was leisure and social participation. I chose leisure as crocheting is an interest of mine, but something I haven't taken the time to learn. While it is not an obligatory occupation, such as work or sleep, it certainly brought a peace of mind and happiness in my heart during the experience. I chose social participation, this being the more prevalent of the two chosen. My family tree is filled with linen makers from Ireland, seamstresses who worked directly with the Singer Company in Hoboken, New Jersey, and farmers who passed down canning recipes. About halfway through crocheting, I realized I didn't have enough fabric. Being new to this medium, I didn't correctly visualize how fast it would get used. I reached out via email to my work colleagues to see if anyone had material they no longer needed. I was gifted with a big bag of all different material, and during the exchange, they would ask me what I was working on, and I was able to share this assignment with them. I was proud to show my progress with it and look forward to sharing the final product. The material I started with was my father's shirts I had been saving and leftover material from quilts I made with my grandmother for my twin girls when they were 3. Being able to add material from other important people in my life became a spiritual experience as I wove all of these lives together. There were times I became emotional with those thoughts and ideas. The tools that I used for this project was a size H white plastic crochet hook, sewing scissors, fabric of various styles and materials such as cotton, polyester, flannel, plain, and designed, a YouTube instruction video to learn how to crochet and the necessary pattern for the rug, a heavy wooden white kitchen chair, and my side of a king-size bed, as well as light varying from daylight to overhead light, and finally a bedside light. The lighting in these two spaces shifted from natural daylight to overhead and bedside lighting as it got darker outside. I found the artificial light to allow me to see more clearly compared to the natural daylight. I started the first 2 sessions of the project at the kitchen table on the wooden chair. It's central in my home and allowed me to be present for my children if they needed me. Around the 3rd session, I would grow impatient early on. I decided to switch to my bed to ease the strain on my lower back. I was able to move back to the kitchen chair for the final session. During the project, I had intermittent times where I had to stop and tend to my children. My partner works at night and I during the day. During one of my earlier sessions, my oldest daughter, Kenzie, decided to make an apron for herself. Her and I got to spend some nice time together as I was crocheting and she was measuring and cutting her material. My other daughter, Madison, also found time to sit with me while I was cutting the material, and we got to spend time together as well. The art of handwork comes from both of my grandmothers, and I felt very connected to them during this project. I also felt connected to my father because I finally used his shirts I had been saving for 10 years. It was hard to part with, but I was excited to put them to use. I did 3 3-hour sessions and a final 2-hour session equaling 11 hours for this project. I worked primarily in the evening and the afternoon, and the final session was in the morning on the weekend. This time frame worked for me because I work full-time from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, and my partner works Tuesday through Friday, 6:30 to 10:30, and then Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 6 p.m. I also have 4 daughters that are home for the summer. I found it difficult to deviate from my habit of always being physically available for my children. It made the project move slower than if I would have started it in the bedroom instead of the kitchen chair. My role as mom and only parent in the evening and weekends posed a challenge to finishing this project within the time limits. Our family routine based on work schedules was a dominant influence in when, where, and how I accomplished this project. The 2 body functions I am highlighting are mental and neuromusculoskeletal. Within the mental function, under the higher level cognitive function, my praxis skills were heavily utilized. Otherwise known as motor planning, my ability to crochet improved, allowing me to not have to think as hard or as often about what movements my hands needed to make in order to continue the crochet pattern. The second one that I picked, neuromusculoskeletal, and movement-related functions, focuses on the ease with which a joint moves through motion, from our book by Thomas on page 108. My left wrist did a lot of the manipulation of the crochet hook while my right hand held and guided the material. Full range of motion was not needed, but full endurance was absolutely needed for this project, as staying in the same position was quite tiring. Two body structures I used were structures related to movement. My fingers, hands, wrists, and arms each had different responsibilities to complete the crochet pattern. This tested my joint mobility and at times my endurance. If one side of the project wasn't held how it was supposed to be, the whole chain could have fallen out, undoing all of the work I had done to that point. The second, structures of the nervous system. This project called upon higher level cognitive mental functions such as praxis and motor planning. I had to recall the pattern and hand movements needed to achieve the crochet chain. I watched the instruction video a few times, but then did the rest from memory to test this function. Performance skills that were vital to completing this task were coordinates, manipulates, and flows. To coordinate is to use two or more body parts together to utilize an object. It was important that my hands worked together to execute the crochet pattern needed to complete the rug. I also chose manipulates because it refers to using dexterous finger movements without evidence of fumbling when manipulating task objects. Both definitions are from Thomas, page 160 and 159 respectively. Throughout the crocheting process, all of my fingers on the right hand were engaged and responsible for feeding and gripping the fabric. My left hand is doing the weaving and circling to keep the project moving. Finally, flow is the last critical performance skill. Thomas defines flows as smooth and fluid arm and wrist movements when interacting with task objects. It is evident in the crochet pattern where my movements were not fluid. It created a bubbling effect in the rug. It was important for my movements to be consistent in their flow to create a smooth rug. Looking at possible safety hazards for this project, the crochet hook had a point at the end, and at times I had to push it very hard to get it through the thick material. If I was too close to it or didn't have enough strength in my hands, I could have poked myself in the eye. The scissors also could cause injury if not used or stored correctly. When looking at grading and adapting this occupation, when thinking of grading down, to grade this down for a client, you could use a larger crochet hook. The larger, the easier, usually, and more of a polyester blend in the fabric. I found that the flannel was the hardest to work with. It had no give and no elasticity. You could also have this be done in a group setting, similar to a quilting circle, that would promote social interactions. Hand-over-hand assistance while crocheting would also make this less of a challenge if the therapist was guiding the client's hands to complete this occupation. To grade this up and make it harder for the client, I would pick a smaller crochet hook and a more complicated pattern to make this harder. Also, having them learn it from a paper pattern perhaps instead of a video may be more of a mental challenge as well. According to the framework on page S35, the definition of well-being is contentment with one's health, self-esteem, sense of belonging, security, and opportunities for self-determination, meaning, roles, and helping others. While working on this project, I felt an incredible sense of well-being, from gathering the needed materials and their meanings to me, my father's shirts, my twin daughters' leftover material from their first mama-made quilts that my grandmother made with me, to my coworkers reading and responding to my email about donations. I felt secure about my social groups and history with my family. Unexpectedly, my oldest daughters liked what they saw, and it inspired them to start their own handwork projects. This rag rug is the culmination of many events and people. From my father's sudden and unexpected passing to my grandmother, crippled with arthritis, verbally coaching me on how to cut, measure, and sew by hand, my coworkers who donated material and were interested in learning more about what I was making, and me for finally achieving something I had on a wish list for over 6 years, for carving out the time to recall my past, connect with my present, and dream about my future. I will be forever thankful.